Right now, somewhere in the world, a cat is knocking a glass off a table for absolutely no reason. It lives in someone's house, it eats food someone else paid for, it sleeps wherever it wants, it ignores commands, it wakes people up at 4 in the morning. And somehow, despite behaving like a tiny furry dictator, humans have devoted enormous parts of their lives to keeping it comfortable. Today, there are more than 600 million domestic cats on Earth. They sleep on our beds, they sit on our keyboards, they stare at walls as if they can see things that do not exist. But unlike dogs, cats were never really trained. Nobody sat down and said, "We should invent a small predator that lives in our house." Nobody planned cats. And the strangest part is that humans may not have domesticated cats at all. Cats may have domesticated themselves. To understand how this happened, you have to go back around 10,000 years to one of the biggest mistakes or greatest accidents in human history. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had lived one way. We moved, we followed animals, we gathered plants. If food disappeared, we disappeared too. And then suddenly, in a region now called the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, humans did something they had never done before. We tried making food stay still. People planted grain. They built storage pits. They made shelters. For the first time, humans began staying in one place, and without realizing it, they accidentally built the largest mouse buffet in human history. Because wherever humans stored grain, mice appeared. Not one or two thousands. Early granaries became rodent paradise. Mice ate food. Mice contaminated food. Mice multiplied faster than people could stop them. And for early humans, this was becoming a serious problem. But just beyond the edges of those villages, beyond the firelight, another animal was watching. The African wildcat, a small, solitary predator that had lived across North Africa and the Near East for hundreds of thousands of years. It hunted alone. It moved silently. Its eyes worked far better in darkness than yours ever could. And it specialized in one thing: killing rodents. To a wildcat, early human settlements looked almost absurd. Imagine seeing a giant pile of food, then noticing that the food had attracted an endless supply of mice, and noticing that the mice kept returning every single night. For a predator, it was paradise. The mice had walked into a trap. They just did not know it yet. And soon the wildcats followed, but here's where the story becomes strange. Wildcats are not friendly animals. They are cautious, suspicious, territorial. Most would have stayed far from humans. The aggressive ones probably got killed. The extremely fearful ones stayed in the wilderness, but somewhere in those populations, a few individuals were different. They tolerated humans slightly better. They panicked less. They stayed a little closer. And that tiny difference changed history because the less fearful cats got something the others didn't. More food. More food meant healthier cats. Healthier cats meant more kittens. And the kittens inherited the same temperament. Generation after generation, the calmer cats survived better than the cautious ones. Humans weren't breeding them. Humans weren't training them. Humans were barely involved. Humans did not tame cats. Cats discovered a loophole in human civilization. They found a system that fed them, and they quietly moved in. There was no decision, no treaty, no moment where humans pointed at a cat and said, "Yes, we will keep this one." The cat simply arrived and refused to leave. For a long time, this was just a theory. Then in 2004, an archaeologist named Jean-Denis Vigne opened a grave on the island of Cyprus and found something nobody expected. Inside was a human buried beside a cat. The grave was around 9,500 years old, and there was something even stranger. Cyprus had no native cats. None. Which meant somebody had brought that cat there on a boat across open water thousands of years before written history. The cat had not been eaten, it had not been discarded, it had been placed gently beside its person. By then humans clearly cared. But the weirdness continued. In 2007, scientists compared DNA from hundreds of cats across the world. They compared house cats to every wildcat species they could find, and the result was almost unbelievable. Every domestic cat alive today, that every tabby, every Persian, every Maine Coon, every cat currently sitting on the internet traces back to just 5 female African wildcats in the Near East. 5 animals, 5. Their descendants would eventually spread across nearly every continent on Earth. But what might be strangest of all is how little cats actually changed. Dogs changed dramatically. Their faces softened, their bodies shrank, their behavior transformed. Cats barely changed at all. Scientists comparing cat skeletons often struggle to tell domestic cats and wild cats apart. Behaviorally, your cat is still roughly 95% wildcat. It can still hunt, still survive alone, still become feral within a single generation. Cats are one of the least domesticated animals on Earth. But 2 things did change, and both seem a little suspicious. The first is the purr. Cats can purr at frequencies between around 25 and 150 hertz, a range researchers believe may promote healing, reduce stress, and lower blood pressure. The animal lying on your chest is producing vibrations that calm your nervous system. And then there is the second change. The really strange one. Adult wildcats almost never meow. They hiss, growl, yowl, chirp, but the meow is mostly something kittens use for their mothers. Your cat does something different. Your cat meows constantly. Researchers think the modern cat meow evolved to resemble the sound of a human infant crying. Our brains are biologically wired to react to that sound. We hear it and immediately pay attention. The cat figured out which frequency hacks the human nervous system, and now uses it to make us open cans. By the time humans realized what was happening, cats had become impossible to separate from us. And nowhere was this more obvious than ancient Egypt. Around 3,000 years ago, things became slightly ridiculous. Cats were elevated to something close to divinity. The goddess Bastet was depicted with the head of a cat. Killing a cat, even accidentally, could mean death. When household cats died, families sometimes shaved off their eyebrows in mourning. Think about that. Humans went from tolerating predators near grain stores to building temples for them. From Egypt, cats spread everywhere humans went, onto ships, into Roman villas, across Europe, across trade routes, across oceans. They survived the Middle Ages, when many were associated with witchcraft. They survived the Industrial Revolution. They survived everything, mostly by ignoring it. And this is what makes cats different from almost every other domesticated animal. Dogs joined us, horses worked with us, cows obeyed us. Cats never really did any of that. They remained wild in almost every way that mattered. They simply allowed us into their lives on their terms. They sleep beside us, but they could leave. They love us, but they didn't have to. Tonight your cat will probably walk across your keyboard, knock something off a shelf, stare into a corner for no reason, and demand food like it owns the place. Because in a way, it does. Humans thought they were building farms for themselves. But somewhere beside the first grain stores in history, a small predator looked out from the darkness and quietly decided to move in. 10,000 years later, we're still feeding its descendants